Welcome back to Crop Talk with Karston. This week's topic is Livestock Risk Protection, also known as LRP. We are very lucky to be joined today by who I consider anyways to be the queen of LRP, Kimberly Stone. Kimberly is the National Livestock Specialist and Regional Sales and Service Manager for the Heartland region for RCIS. I was fortunate enough to meet Kimberly at our annual Crop West training 2 years ago, and then again in this past training. And I just have to say that I was in awe of her knowledge in this area. And then so I guess I figured who better to have the listeners learn from than Kimberly herself. She's not only a great resource because of her knowledge and position with RCIS, but her and her family also run a family ranch in New Mexico and use LRP firsthand to mitigate risk in a volatile market. So anyways, Kimberly, I guess that's a quick introduction of you, but I'll let you take it from there to introduce yourself a little bit further for the listeners.
Well, thank you so much, Karston. I have to say I haven't been called the queen of LRP before, so I'll take that as a compliment. But as Karston said, my name is Kimberly Stone. I do reside with my husband here in the center of the picture and our two sons, Alec in the maroon shirt and Bryce in the Silver Valley cowboy hat. We live in South Central New Mexico. I was also born and raised in a ranching family, and I'm just excited to get to work in an industry that allows me to get to help farmers and ranchers. And I've been with RCIS now since 2022. I started out as the National Livestock Specialist, really specializing in the livestock products that are offered through the USDA Risk Management Program, and recently stepped into an additional role overseeing for all crops for what we consider to be the Heartland region, Karston. So I'm really excited to get to talk about livestock since I don't get to do that as much as I did in my previous role.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess for anybody that's listening that doesn't know who Kimberly is, you're listening to probably the most, in my opinion anyways, knowledgeable person in this area, not only because of her position with RCIS, but also somebody that uses this firsthand. So speaking of RCIS, Duchscher Kapperud Insurance is a proud partner with RCIS, who Kimberly is obviously with. They are one of our approved insurance providers. They're somebody that we just value our partnership with. We, whether it's Kimberly or somebody else in that company, they're always there for us. So if we don't know the answer, if you have a question for us, we know who to contact, and usually it ends with somebody with RCIS. So highly value our partnership with RCIS.
Yes,
just as a quick overview as LRP, I'll just give the quick snapshot of LRP and then let the expert take it from there. So LRP, Livestock Risk Protection, protects against a decline in market price below the insured selected coverage level. So essentially, it's just locking in a floor price on your cattle or swine for a specific time period. A way of thinking about it is you're setting a safety net under your market price so that if the national price drops below the elected insured level, when it's time to sell, you receive an indemnity payment to make up the difference. So all in all, it's a great way for ranchers to essentially protect something that maybe they haven't been able to in the past. So I'll let you take it from there, just describing essentially what LRP is and why somebody should buy it.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to look at protecting. And, I could think of several just that happened today. The feeder boards are already limit down today. This morning after some press that came out yesterday. So as we look at the volatile market that we're in, having protection on a set of calves that you have right now is definitely a good idea. And it's really, like Karston said, it's just setting that floor. So very similar for those of you that have participated in regular hedging practices over the years, you can do that same thing. You're going to set that floor and you are going to pretty much forget about it, because what you agree to, that's what you're going to be paying at the end. There's no margin calls or any other kind of fees that go along with it. The quote that Karston gives you, that's what you're going to pay. We have a wider weight range than on the CME because this product is really designed for producers of all sizes. There's no limits on how many head you can cover on the minimum side. There is on the maximum side, but it really allows the smaller producer to be able to have a way to customize the coverage for them. You can buy as many endorsements as you want throughout the year, meaning if I want to put 5 head on today, I can, or I could do, as many as 12,000 head in one day. So definite opportunities for customization there, Karston.
Yeah, for sure. One big benefit on it that you kind of touched on is that, this product is subsidized, right? So depending on the coverage level that you have, there's going to be at least a minimum, correct me if I'm wrong, but 35% subsidy, even if you're at the highest level. So ultimately, if the government is, paying a portion of that premium for you that you wouldn't be getting, if you were doing it outside of crop insurance, the same type of coverage, I guess. That's one of the biggest benefits, I guess, in LRP that, in my opinion, also, like you said, it's very customizable. But I think one question that we get a lot that I wanted to touch on for you, I guess, is can you explain to the listeners how the prices that growers are able to lock in for their LRP coverage is tracked and set? And then also, once growers have that coverage in place, how is the ending price value, how that is set to determine whether or not they will receive an indemnity?
Absolutely. And so, one thing I do want to share today, we're going to be talking only about as this relates to beef.
Mm-hmm.
LRP also has options for swine. It also has very specific pieces for dairy cattle. And so we're not going to talk too much about the dairy cattle side. We're really just going to focus on the cow calf beef producer types for today, but know that Karston can answer those questions for y'all if you do have any questions about that coming up. And so when we talk about the pricing as it relates specifically to the cattle, the beef cattle side, we have feeder cattle options and we have live cattle, which we in LRP, the live cattle piece is under fed cattle. Okay, so those are the two types that we can book coverage under. And we're going to use the CME boards for that. Okay, so here's a screenshot of this was taken this morning for both the feeder cattle and the live cattle. That was an average. And if we look at the next slide, we're going to see an example of the contracts for each month. This is specific to the feeder board. But the prices, when you're asking Karston for a quote, and these quotes are offered almost every day, unless there's a special report, which on the beef side is the cattle on feed report that is released the third Friday of each month. We don't have sales those days. I mentioned at the very beginning of this, Karston, that the feeder board had already limited down. If things stay that way, prices would not be offered for today because it had reached the limit down, or limit up in the other options. Those prices aren't offered those days. But when you ask him for a price, and let's say we're going to look at October of 26, for instance, that price is $369. So we're going to see a 100% coverage level that corresponds with that price. That's how the price is set. But the important thing to understand is that we're using futures to set the price, but we're actually using cash to settle at the end. So that is something that really confuses producers, because when they come to the end of their endorsement, they're thinking, oh, I can just look at the future price today and that ought to tell me if I'm technically in the money or not, right? Not the case. We're looking at that cash piece. And on the next few slides, we talk a little bit about the importance of, how that cattle feeder index is actually settled. So we're really hitting a very high level today. So what you need to understand is if you are interested in this product, it's so important to go to Karston and really have detailed discussions, because we offer wider weight ranges, right? So there's multipliers that have to go into setting these prices. So sometimes it's not just apples to apples. So if you're a cow-calf producer and you're calving in March and you're shipping cattle off in October, maybe call them five weights, 5.5, maybe 6 weights, you could fall in several different categories there. And you can see on the settlement piece that we're utilizing that feeder cattle index and the ending values that come from those 12 highlighted green states. That is how that feeder index is categorized. And it is only for cattle 700 to 899 pounds. So if I'm sitting there with an endorsement with 5.5 weight steers, what does that mean for me? Well, that means that there is a multiplier on that ending index value. And Karston can go over that in much greater detail with you, but just make sure you always remember to ask those questions. So when that feeder cattle index comes out and there's a report that the CME issues, and for this example, this is actually back in 2023, and my goodness, have we come a long way since then, just on the prices we look at this, Karston, but it was a quick screenshot here. That reported index number, that's the number that we're going to be using. Okay. And that, once again, is for our feeder cattle division. And from there, there's going to be a multiplier if I have heifers, if I have lightweight steers, if I have some that are dairy possibly. And again, we're not focusing on that today, but anyway, the next slide tells us how does it settle for those live cattle, right? So remember, we're using futures. We're using that live cattle board to figure out what that price is we're going to set. And then the RMA, or the Risk Management Association, utilizes a report from USDA. It's the 5-area weekly weighted average direct slaughter report. And it is steers, live FOB. You can see the red box there on the screen, Karston, that says over 80% choice. That's where most of the cattle settle at. The 5 areas that are included, we've got Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. Those 3 states together equal 1 area. Kansas, Nebraska, and Colorado, Karston, each of those states are by themselves. And then we have Iowa and Minnesota feedlots. Those 2 are together. So it's the average of all of those groups together that give us that weighted average price of $1.89. So if we'd bought coverage, Karston, at $2 or 200, I should say, and it settles at 189, then I'm due an indemnity just based on that price difference, right? So important thing to remember, futures is how we're setting the price and cash is how we're settling.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's, like you said, I think that's the area of the biggest confusion of how it's set. And then, you know, is it what I sell my cattle for? Is it the cat? Where's that price coming from? So I guess on the next topic of a question we get a lot is, can you talk about how the target weight comes into play for growers when they're selecting the coverage type and the endorsement length that they select when they put on the endorsement?
Absolutely. And Karston, you said something there that I probably should have led with, that I hope you get the highest possible price you can for your cattle, but it doesn't matter, right? It is that ending cash value of those reports that really figure the total for us. But I do hope that all of us producers get the highest possible price wherever we sell them. And so when we're talking about the weight is really important. We have the feeder cattle option, which I mentioned to you. Within that, we have unborn bull calves and heifers. So that means that I could insure the calf that's in a cow. So my cows are bred right now. So if I wanted to place coverage today, I could do that with an unborn bull calf and heifer endorsement. I could insure them up to 599 pounds only. Okay. Now, each one of these things, it is a program where you have to have documentation. We're not going to talk today a lot about the detailed pieces of documentation, but just know that you're going to have them. Other questions that Karston will talk to you about when you come to visit with him about these products. Weight 1 and weight 2. This does not matter if you're talking heifers or steers, Bramer cattle. It doesn't matter. You're going to fall in the category of either a weight 1 or a weight 2. That weight is 100 pounds to 599. Weight 2s are 600 to 1,000 pounds. Okay. And what this is asking is the ending weight, Karston. So what are those cattle going to weigh at the end when you market them? That's the data you want to be able to give Karston. Once again, that example of if I calve in March, I ship in October, I've got 5.5, 6 weights. My husband and I actually just shipped our cattle on Monday. We calve a lot earlier. We're weaning a calf that can be as much or more than 800 pounds, depending. I think we averaged about 765 this year on those cattle. So we would have been in the weight 2 category. So back in February, when we're looking to buy coverage, we're going to look at, okay, I know those cattle are going to be between 750 and 8 weights. I'm going to book coverage at weight 2. Okay. So as a producer, it's important you know what your ending weight is. The other piece that plays into that is a definition within the program itself that my cattle, when I sell them, need to be marketable. The definition of marketable is that they meet the minimum weight. Yeah, that we do have a slide on that. Yeah, this is they meet the minimum weight that the category is. So in my example, 7.5 weight steers bought a weight to endorsement. They would have to weigh a minimum of 600 pounds. Okay, otherwise there's going to be some penalties involved. There's also some forgiveness in this, is if you're in an area of drought and you didn't have the feed, so the cattle didn't gain. And honestly, Karston, in my neck of the woods, that can happen pretty regularly. In your neck of the woods, that can happen regularly as well. So another important piece to this is the marketability. And so we can head back over to the weight slides. And I know we're going through this so quickly today because it's just a high overview, but hopefully it's enough to pique interest and let people know a few of the questions that they need to answer when they come talk to you. But the next category, of course, is those fed cattle that are going to be in the feedlot. And again, at the end, it's going to be 1,600. It can be as much as 1,600, I should say. So if you book coverage at 1,500 pounds, those cattle have to weigh at least 1,000 pounds. I'll tell you, that's not a concern at this particular stage. Cattle are leaving the feedlot much higher than that. And it's also steers and heifers together. We don't care if it's heifers or steers when they get to this point. It's just steers and heifers. I do have a note on here. There is an option for dairy cull cows only. And so that's something, if you're in the dairy business, that you would like more information on, Karston can help you with details on that too.
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of already touched on it for yourself, but currently there's, a lot of, growers, producers that just completed, preg checking, know that they have, calves and the cow, all that. And so walk us through some options, for instance, that maybe you guys are thinking about in terms of how to, if you want to insure them, if you want to insure the full amount, just kind of the thought process, I guess, behind that specific scenario.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, everybody's risk tolerance is different, right, Karston? So this is a picture of my husband here several years ago. I guess I should have had a current one because it's actually a little bit greener today than it was then. But, his risk tolerance, he wants to make sure that his bottom line is covered. If we have our operating note, he wants to make sure that at the end of the day, we're going to be able to clear that operating note out and make sure we can do this again another day, right? So he goes in and he calculates what that looks like for him. He does not actually buy coverage on our heifers. He buys it just on our steers, and he buys enough coverage, once again, to make sure if the bottom totally fell out of the market, he would be able to continue to do this another day. So that's going to look different for everybody, right? Some people are going to want that full coverage. So you can buy coverage on 100% of your animals, no problem. That's fine. But knowing what your risk appetite is and what's your goal with this insurance, right? We all have insurance on our car and our home because we want to make sure we can replace that at the end of the day, right? So what is your goal in your operation? That has to be the first question that as a producer needs to answer. And then I'm going to come to my agent and I'm going to say, all right, Karston, ready to do this. Talk to me about the weights, right? As I shared, week calf earlier, we're going to week calf in January. So we're weaning a bigger calf in October that clearly puts us in the weight 2 category, right? That's 7.5 to 800 pounds. There's no doubt about it. But in your neck of the woods, you're probably going to have some guys who are around that 5.5, 6 weights, right?
Yeah.
So there, Karston's going to provide you a quote for both a weight 1 at 599 pounds and a weight 2 at say maybe 610, 615, somewhere in there, depending on where you think you might end up at, because he wants to make sure to place you in the best category and not have any kind of a penalty, right? Because once you go over that 600 pounds, there might be a penalty if you don't actually meet it at the end of the day in October when you ship those cattle. So we want to make sure we're looking at those things. The next piece is, what if I do want to place that unborn? opportunity right now. The market is extremely high right now, especially if we were talking yesterday, right? Be looking if we were talking yesterday, we might want to go in and do an unborn. My cows are bred. I can prove that. I got to be able to prove that. And I could cover them up to 599 pounds, right? So you could come in today, you could buy coverage for next September or October. Those prices are available, and really set it and kind of forget about it. You have your risk management done. Now, I don't worry if it's steers or heifers. We don't know what your cattle are going to have right now, right? Unless you're doing ultrasounding, that's a pretty specific operation that they're going to do that. And so most people don't do that. So it is just a bull calf and a heifer endorsement combined. That feeder cattle index price and the pricing, the futures pricing, we're going to use 105% of that number, okay, to figure that out. And you can do 100% of your herd, 80%, 75, once again, totally customizable to you. Okay. So figuring out those head numbers is something always take into account death loss. I think that's always an important thing. The coverage price, we haven't talked about that in any form yet. The coverage price can be anywhere from 100% down to 75%. And it's most of the time in 5% increments until you get to, there's 99, 100%. Most people are booking at those higher coverage levels because if there is a loss, then it's going to kick in and trigger an indemnity quicker, Karston. You can look at, there's reports that RMA gives that is open to the public. You can look and see what's being sold in your area if you wonder about what that is as producers, but it is usually at the 100% coverage level. And those prices do change daily. So this is something that as you're watching those prices getting ready to lock in, know that if you wanted yesterday's price, that window closed. It's a very short window. Karston is going to get those prices roughly around 1 p.m. Central Time to 2 p.m. Central Time. So we'll call it 1 p.m. Mountain Time on a regular basis. Those prices are going to load and he can tell you what the price is for that day. Karston has to have this endorsement booked before 8:25 the next morning. So not a lot of time to sleep on it, so to speak, and to get that in, right, Karston? So we have to be watching and kind of know what that market's doing and be ready to lock in that coverage. And then the last thing that we really got to consider is what end date do I want? Meaning I want the coverage to end on, we'll say October 15th. The nice thing about that is you have 60 days on the front side of that endorsement and on the back side. So if I picked October 15th, then that really gives me a 120-day window there where I could possibly sell those cattle. So it's a lot of window, a lot of wiggle room. There's always fine print in every one of these policies, which there's some fine print around drought and other things that might affect that 120-day window. So it's really important as you all producers are looking and wanting to learn more about LRP that you work with Karston. He can answer those questions. He can tell you what those little nuances are. He can tell you all the types of verifiable documentation that you're going to need for this program, because anything we've got to be able to support one that we in fact did own the cattle first and foremost, right? And that unborn example, Karston, those cows were bred when we bought coverage. So lots of moving pieces, and it's important to have a strong agent like Karston to help you work through this.
Yeah, and I mean, we already slightly talked about it, but explain. So, for instance, you already touched on the coverage prices change daily, right? And so in order for a person to, we've referred to an endorsement, which I think there might be some confusion on the difference between an application and an endorsement. And I guess, can you just quickly explain why it's beneficial for a grower to submit an application if they're even remotely interested in LRP, so that then they can place an endorsement?
Yeah, great question. So when you're wanting to sign up for this, the USDA and the Risk Management Administration, they have to determine that you're eligible for coverage so that you're in good standing, basically. So to do that, you do that with an application. And that also locks you in to work with your agent. That application has to be logged into our system. We send it on to RMA. And then at that point in time, once RMA approves it, you can work with Karston any day from that point on to actually book coverage. So very important, because we all know that sometimes technology has a black moment, we'll call it, where it's something may disappear or it doesn't work as quickly as we'd like for it to. So get that application in today if you're even thinking about possibly writing. We hope that, the pieces that are caused the market to go down today, that levels out and we don't see a continual decline of things over the next few days. But to get that application in, so if you are ready to pull the trigger in the next few days, then you literally call Karston and he can book the piece that actually ties you to premium. And that's the important thing. Doing an application does not tie you to any kind of premium, Karston. So it's only after you work with him, you get that very specific quote, and that can be one head or 12,000 head on any given day. So
yeah. So I mean, I think that's part of the confusion, is some people might be hesitant to submit an application because they're like, well, is that going to cost me money, right? But I think it's important for them to know that it doesn't really harm you to have an application. It just then allows you to then place coverage when it comes time, when you decide that you do want to place that endorsement. So I guess we're kind of wrapping up here. So just if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask us. I'm probably the first to tell you that I am by all means not an expert in this realm, but I definitely know the right person, that being Kimberly. Meeting her at the Crop West, this picture here is a picture of us. Unfortunately, she had to have me on her golf team. So we got to get to know each other pretty well there. And again, we are very proud to be a representative of RCIS, and especially with Kimberly on the LRP side. So if there's any questions that anybody has, please feel free to reach out to myself. I might even direct you to Kimberly and bug her with questions. So I guess in wrapping up, Kimberly, is there anything else, I guess, that comes to mind for you as an overview that maybe we missed, or anything else you wanted to mention?
No, I just want to reiterate that this was a very, very high level overview, really focusing only on a few parts, the main questions that we get across the board. It by no means is comprehensive. And so the important thing is just to, reach out to Karston, and, don't be afraid to share the details of your operation, because if you want to work with an agent, they've got to know the details to make sure they have your best interests at heart and get you the coverage that you really need, because you don't need to cover more than what you need. There's no need to pay for extra. So make sure you're just communicating clearly on those things. And as always, thanks so much for having me, Karston, and the opportunity to work with you all. RCIS is proud to be a partner, and we actually operate in all 50 states across the country, and are excited to support not only livestock, but also all multi-peril products. So.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully somebody learned something today, I guess.